Welcome back to our channel. In today's lesson, we're diving deep into the Fichtean Curve, a powerful story structure that could completely transform how you write your next novel or short story. If you've ever wondered why some stories pull you in and never let go, while others leave you yawning after the first chapter, you're about to discover one of the biggest secrets in storytelling. The Fichtean Curve isn't just another boring grammar lesson. It's literally the blueprint that some of your favorite authors use to keep you turning pages until 3 a.m. So what exactly is the Fichtean Curve? Picture this. Instead of your story being a gentle hill that slowly rises to one big climax, the Fichtean Curve is more like a mountain range with multiple peaks getting higher and higher until you reach the ultimate summit. Now here's where things get interesting, and where a lot of people get confused. The structure gets its name from Johann Gottlieb Fichte, an 18th century German philosopher who lived from 1762 to 1814. But here's the plot twist. Fichte never actually created a story structure for writers. The term Fichtean Curve was actually coined much later by writing instructors, most notably John Gardner in his 1983 book, The Art of Fiction. Writing scholars borrowed Fichte's name because his philosophical approach of dialectical thinking, where ideas progress through opposition and resolution, mirrors exactly how stories build through escalating conflicts. So while Fichte inspired the conceptual framework, the curve as we know it today is actually a modern invention for writing instruction. Now here's where things get interesting. The legendary writing scholar John Gardner explains that every energetic novel falls into three parts, what Aristotle called beginning, middle, and end. Think of these as roughly equal chunks of your story. But here's the catch that trips up a lot of new writers. You can't just dump all your exposition in the first third, develop everything in the second third, and wrap it up in the last third. Why? Because exposition on its own has no forward momentum. If you spend the first 50 pages just explaining who everyone is and what's happening, your readers will literally fall asleep. That's why Gardner recommends starting in the middle of things. Jump right into the action and weave in the background information as you go. Think about how The Hunger Games starts. Suzanne Collins doesn't spend 3 chapters explaining the history of Panem. She drops us right into Katniss's world on the morning of the reaping, and we learn about the capital's oppression through her actions and thoughts. Here's where the Fichtean Curve gets really powerful. For your story to work, your main character needs to be caught between two forces pulling them in opposite directions. And here's the key part. Both forces need to come from inside and outside the character. Take The Fault in Our Stars as an example. Hazel Grace Lancaster is torn between her internal desire to protect herself and others from the emotional pain of loving someone who might die, and her external reality. Augustus, a boy she's falling in love with, despite that fear. But it's more layered than that. She's also battling an internal fear of being emotionally vulnerable and an external force she can't control, her terminal illness. These overlapping pressures, both emotional and situational, create the kind of rising tension that drives a Fichtean-style story. John Gardner visualizes this with a diagram. Line A represents the safe, uneventful path the character could have taken. But instead, the story follows a steeper, jagged line full of crisis points, represented by B in the diagram. The downward arrows represent forces working against your character: illness, antagonists, societal pressure, and natural disasters. The upward momentum, despite these setbacks, comes from internal or external sources of strength, like determination, growth, friendships, or small victories. It's this back-and-forth tension that creates momentum and keeps readers hooked. Now here's where the Fichtean Curve gets its distinctive shape. Instead of one slow build to a single climax, as in the traditional 3-act structure, your story builds through a series of increasingly intense crisis points. Each crisis is bigger than the last, pushing the protagonist further toward transformation. This is part of what John Gardner referred to as the episodic rhythm of a novel. Think about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Harry doesn't just face one big challenge at the end. He faces the troll in the bathroom, then the 3-headed dog, then the devil's snare, then the flying keys, then the chess game, and finally Professor Quirrell. Each challenge gets more dangerous and more personal. This reflects the rising action made of mini climaxes, a hallmark of the Fichtean Curve. This is what keeps readers hooked. Just when they think they can relax, bam, another crisis hits, and it's worse than the last one. Now let's be real here. The Fichtean Curve isn't a magic wand that works for every single story. It's incredibly powerful for certain types of narratives, but it might not be the best choice for every genre or every writer. The Fichtean Curve works best for stories where your main character has a clear, driving goal. There is a strong external and internal conflict. The stakes keep escalating throughout the story. You want to maintain high tension and reader engagement. It's perfect for thrillers and mysteries where there is constant danger or conflict, dystopian fiction and adventure stories with escalating stakes, and coming-of-age novels where characters face increasingly difficult emotional and external challenges. But if you're writing a quiet literary novel about internal transformation or a slice-of-life story about family relationships, you might want to explore other structures like the 3-act structure or the hero's journey instead. Now, let's walk through each section using a story most of you probably know, The Maze Runner by James Dashner. Part 1, Rising Action. This is where those multiple crisis points really shine. We start with Thomas arriving in the glade with no memory, but instead of just explaining everything, Dashner throws crisis after crisis at us. Thomas breaks the rules and enters the maze to save Albie and Minho. Then Teresa arrives and everything changes. She's the first girl, and she brings a disturbing message. The doors stop closing for the first time ever. The grievers attack the glade itself. Each crisis builds on the last one, and the pressure keeps mounting. Thomas faces opposition from gladers like Gally, who want to maintain the old ways, but he also has allies who believe in his leadership. Part 2, Climax. The ultimate peak of the Fichtean Curve comes when Thomas realizes they need to throw themselves into the griever hole to escape. This is the moment of highest tension. Everything Thomas has learned, every relationship he's built, every risk he's taken leads to this desperate gamble. Half the gladers follow him into what seems like certain death, while the others stay behind. It's the ultimate test of Thomas's leadership and the ultimate risk. Part 3, Falling Action. After the climactic escape from the maze, we get the revelation about Wicht and the real world. The immediate conflict is resolved. They're out of the maze, but Dashner sets up the larger conflict that will drive the rest of the series. The tension winds down as we learn the truth, but it also opens up new questions that will fuel the next book. Now, let's explore 5 secret tips for using the Fichtean Curve structure. Secret number 1, start with the internal conflict first. Before you figure out what external obstacles your character will face, understand what they're fighting inside themselves. Katniss's internal struggle with survival versus sacrifice drives everything else in the Hunger Games. Secret number 2, make each crisis point reveal character. Don't just throw random obstacles at your protagonist. Each challenge should force them to make choices that show us who they really are. When Thomas decides to enter the maze to save Albie and Minho, we learn that he's naturally brave and selfless. Secret number 3, connect your crises to the theme. Every crisis point should somehow relate to what your story is really about. In The Fault in Our Stars, each obstacle Hazel faces connects to the central theme of love versus loss. Secret number 4, don't forget to give your character some wins. Those ascending arrows in Gardner's diagram matter. Your protagonist needs some victories along the way, or readers will get depressed and give up. Even in dark stories, characters need moments of hope and success. Secret number 5, plan your exposition carefully. Remember Gardner's advice about weaving exposition throughout the story. Create a list of everything readers need to know, then figure out the most dramatic way to reveal each piece of information. Never just tell us something, you could show us instead. Remember, the Fichtean Curve isn't just about plotting. It's about understanding how conflict drives character development and keeps readers emotionally invested in your story. Whether you're writing your first novel or your 15th, this structure can help you create the kind of page-turner that readers literally can't put down. What's your favorite book that uses multiple crisis points to build tension? Drop a comment below and let us know which story had you completely hooked from start to finish. That's all from us today. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more lessons and ideas. See you next time.